Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll get started in just a second. Just waiting for folks to finish connecting. Thanks for being here today. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll get started in just a second. Just waiting for folks to finish connecting. So it's looking like we have critical mass. So for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and kick us off. Thank you so much for everyone for joining this briefing today. And before I kick things off, actually, I just want to say a quick note about the format of today's briefing. We'll start with opening remarks and presentations, which we will record. And then we'll move into a question and answer and a discussion session, which will not be recorded, so that we can have a more candid conversation. So please do stick around for the Q&A and the discussion as well. But again, thank you so much for being here. My name is Luisa Galveo. I'm an international policy campaigner with Friends of the Earth US. And together with my colleague, Kate DeAngelis, as well as our partners at the Sierra Club, we would like to welcome you to this important briefing on US financing of fossil fuels abroad, and particularly what US lawmakers can do to help. So thank you so much for being here. As you all probably know, the world just emerged from COP26, a historic climate conference in Glasgow. And while important commitments were made, as the saying goes, the proof will be in the pudding, and much remains to be done, especially by the United States, which is the world's largest historic contributor to climate change, and has a responsibility as such to not only drastically and urgently reduce emissions at home, but to also support our other countries, especially climate vulnerable countries, and those that did the least to cause the climate crisis, to sustainably meet their energy needs and to end energy poverty around the world, to transition to renewable energy and resilient economies, to adapt to the impacts of climate change and pay for loss and damage. So today we are joined by grassroots leaders from four corners of the world who will speak about their experiences with the impacts of US financed fossil fuel projects in their countries and communities, and what actions they would like to see instead from the US government. And we are also really happy to be joined today by Congressman Huffman, an environmental champion who recently introduced the Sustainable International Financial Institutions Act. We are so grateful, Congressman Huffman, for your leadership on this important legislation and in pushing the US to shift its financing away from fossil fuels and towards supporting countries on a just transition to renewable energy and to more resilient and prosperous economies. Thank you so much, Congressman, for your leadership and for joining us today. And to get us started, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Luisa. Really appreciate Friends of the Earth and Sierra Club hosting this very important briefing, highlighting the problem with continued U.S. financing to support dirty fossil fuel projects all over the world. You know, most Americans don't even realize that despite the urgent need to confront the climate crisis, our American institutions like the Export-Import Bank, like the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, continue providing billions of dollars in new fossil fuel projects annually. While we talk about making things better, they're out there making things worse, and that needs to stop. So instead of lining the pockets of big American oil and gas companies, keeping the world hooked on fossil fuels, these institutions and our public dollars need to be spent helping countries around the world transition to clean, renewable energy. So they don't need to depend on us or on Putin or anyone else to fuel and power their economies. Big oil and gas companies do more than just worsen the climate crisis with these projects around the world. They have a terrible and a long history of undermining health and human rights in countries all over this planet. Earlier this year, the New York Times reported how Chevron lobbied to oppose U.S. sanctions against the state-owned oil and gas company that helped finance the brutal military coup in Myanmar. Why did they do that? Because those sanctions would endanger the viability of a big gas field in which Chevron is a partner. And that's just one of many, many examples. We've also seen reporting on the Exim Bank's decision to lend $4.7 billion to a gas project in Mozambique, despite its own analysis warning of security risks relating to Islamic militants that have since forced the company to suspend work at that site. And there's Pemex, Mexico's state oil and gas company, long supported by our Exim Bank, that's made headlines recently after a gas leak from one of its pipelines literally set the ocean on fire in the Gulf of Mexico. So while Exim is propping up this state-owned oil and gas company, Mexico is undermining its own domestic energy reforms that have brought in international financing in renewable energy projects that are supposed to compete with Pemex. Lastly, I can't help but mention the Sasan Ultra Mega Coal Power Project in India, again supported by our Export-Import Bank. This has been responsible for numerous counts of corruption, human rights, and labor violations, at least 37 deaths over the past decade. The list, unfortunately, goes on and on. U.S.-supported fossil fuel deals made all over the world, from Argentina to Vietnam to Nigeria. And a lot of these were made during the toxic Trump administration. In fact, 70% of the current U.S. International Development Finance Corporation fossil fuel investments happened during the Trump years. But let's be very clear, this was also a problem under previous administrations, including the Obama administration. It has been happening for a long time. These U.S.-backed projects contribute to contaminated air, water shortages, deforestation, and those are just localized impacts. Obviously, all of them exacerbate the climate crisis. So the bottom line is U.S. public financing for international fossil fuel projects has to end. It's a bad investment of taxpayer dollars, especially when the U.S. oil and gas industry consistently prioritizes profit over people and the environment. So the United States has a lot of influence over major energy projects around the world. That is an opportunity to use that power to actually help the world shift and transition to clean, renewable energy and sustainable development. Following last month's climate conference in Glasgow that you referenced, I was there like some of you. I'm just very clear that we have to do more in our country to establish our role as a global leader in the transition to clean energy. That's why I introduced the bill you referenced with Senator Merkley, the Sustainable International Financial Institutions Act. This is a bicameral bill. It'll advance the transition to clean energy around the world by requiring U.S. representatives at international financial institutions like the World Bank to advocate for clean energy and for climate change mitigation, to oppose and any support for new fossil fuel capacity. And it will also prohibit the United States foreign assistance for fossil fuel projects through the entities that we've been talking about, like the Exim Bank, U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. Instead of furthering fossil fuel, the United States public funding of energy projects has to be redirected to help countries transition to clean energy. So as we work toward that goal, towards energy justice as well, we have to listen and learn from global advocates who are on the front lines of this conference, of this crisis, and that's why I'm so pleased that today you've brought together some folks for us to hear directly from grassroots leaders around the world sharing their insights. Thank you for bringing us together. Thanks for including me in this conversation and for your support of my legislation with Senator Merkley. I have a few minutes and am happy to answer a few questions. I may not be able to stay for much more of the program, but very honored to be with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for your powerful words and for your solidarity as well. I'm sure I don't speak only for myself in gratitude for your position on this issue. And a lot of the countries that you mentioned, with Sasan and Nigeria, we have speakers from there today who will be able to provide those insights. So thank you again. Since the congressman has to leave shortly, does anyone have any quick questions or reactions? And then we will pass it over to our presenters, but just wanted to provide that opportunity.
Louisa, if I could just quickly say, yeah, thank you so much, Congressman Huffman. We really appreciate your leadership on this issue. I think it's an issue that many people don't know how much money is going out the door to these projects and how harmful they are. And so just really want to emphasize how much we appreciate your support on this really important issue that many people don't know about and doesn't get a lot of attention. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and thanks to you too for spotlighting it, making sure that that our American leaders know that people are paying attention.
Thank you. So I think we have two hands actually from two of our presenters. So Lonray, first to you and then Melinda.
Thank you.
Congressman, let us know whenever you need to.
Okay, sure.
head off.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I will just make it brief. Thank you, Congressman. Again, flowing from others, I think my concern would be to make this point before you leave. That is also important for the U.S. Congress and also the government and the leadership to also take interest in the attack that some of the land defenders, environmental defenders and human rights defenders are facing in some of these countries, which are also happening in cahoots between the governments, in especially developing countries and third world countries, and some of the companies that are also holding obligation to the United States. I think this will be a very strong point that needs to be made from both the Congress and the U.S. governments towards the government and the multinational corporations. Thank you once again. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your courage and for shining a light on those abuses. That's completely unacceptable, and you're absolutely right. We need to do everything we can to end that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lonray. Thank you, Congressman. Melinda, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Congressman Huffman. I'm really encouraged by what you said. And I think that this bill is actually a really important step, and I completely welcome it. I'm an international lawyer, and I'm currently leading litigation on what is the world's biggest climate change case, challenging Exxon's offshore production, offshore Guyana. And that has been supported by the World Bank, this production, which is transforming Guyana from a carbon sink to a 4 billion ton carbon bomb. And this bill, I think, would be critical in helping to arrest that. I'm a legal drafter, and I have to say, I think the drafting is excellent.
I will pass it along to my staff. So thank you very much for that feedback.
Thank you so much, Melinda, and thank you, Congressman.
And good luck with your litigation. I just read yesterday that Exxon was trying to greenwash itself by talking about becoming carbon neutral in some of its operations in the Permian Basin. So yes, apparently they're going to stop spewing methane with impunity at their well fields, but when they calculate carbon neutrality, they don't count all of the fossil fuel that they push out to all corners of the world to be burned and emitted into the atmosphere. It's just a joke. And so all of us need to continue to call them out and confront them. And I wish you luck in your litigation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and Melinda and Congressman, for your support and solidarity. Any final questions for the Congressman? Hearing none. Well, thank you again, Congressman, for joining us and for introducing this legislation together with Senator Merkley. As you've just heard, this is a big deal, and so we really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, folks, for your great work. Good luck with this briefing and all of your work in the coming months. Take care.
Thank you. So I'll just read here a comment I see in the chat from Christine, who wrote, Representative Huffman, I'm an Einstein Fellow in Representative Grijalva's office. Funny you should mention the Permian Basin. They also funded a science lab for a school there and continue to fund curricula and student work. Thank you for your comment, Christine. So without further ado, we'll hear next from our grassroots leaders from around the world, and they are joining us from all different time zones. And so we'll start in reverse order. We'll start in Indonesia, where it's already 9 o'clock at night. We'll start with Andri Prasetyo. Andri is a program manager at Trend Asia in Indonesia, and will be speaking to us about the situation there. So each of the speakers will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll regroup again for Q&A and discussion. And Andri, forgive me for being the clock police, but I'll let you know when you have a couple minutes remaining. Thank you so much for joining us again, especially at this late hour. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Aloisa. Hello, everyone. Good evening from Indonesia. I'm very pleased today to participate in this great agenda. I would like to quickly introduce myself. As Luisa said before, I'm Andri Prasetyo. You can call me Andri. I'm Research and Program Manager at Trend Asia, a non-governmental organizations based in Jakarta, Indonesia. Trend Asia mainly focus on the fields of development and energy transition in Southeast Asia. Today, I would like to take this opportunity to discuss about the importance of immediate actions and serious actions towards the global transitions to clean energy. In Indonesia, specifically in Java Island, the most populous island in the world, specifically in Banten, together with local community, I'm intensively managing the campaign and advocacy to accelerate the renewable energy utilizations and by preventing a dangerous mega project called Java 9 and 10 project. This project have a 2000 megawatt capacity, and this is one of the largest, world's biggest new coal complexes remaining despite a clean energy transition shifting towards the clean energy and pressure from the international community and the global climate initiative. And Java 9 and 10 project cost a massive investment around 3.2 billion US dollars and potentially being a stranded asset because this project will be only lose 45 million US dollars during the operations based on the recent studies from the Korea Development Institute. And this project was backed by several institutions, including the Hana Bank, which supported by the IFC World Bank Group that has a green equity approach. In 2019, IFC provided around 50 million equity investment in Hana Indonesia and selected this investment to pilot of green equity approach. There has been a lot of serious concern in the world of high finance, of course. For years, World Bank private sector arm, the International Finance Corporations, had been providing support for coal mines and then coal power plants through the indirect investment called financial intermediaries, through the financial intermediaries such as a commercial bank and private equity funds. This project is very problematic because Java 9 and 10 project predicted to release around 250 million tons of carbon dioxide over 25 years, a massive amount of emissions with equivalence of annual emissions of Spain. It means that Java 9 and 10 will be a serious concern for the global efforts to tackle the climate crisis. And the Java 9 and 10 will worsen the air quality and the environment quality in Indonesia, especially in Java Island, because this project will only be pose a serious threat to health conditions of more than 30 million people around Banten and Greater Jakarta, which is the locations of Java 9 and 10 project. Even recently, the panel of judge Central Jakarta District in Indonesia issued a ruling today that Indonesia President's Health Minister and Environmental Minister is violating the law because of keep making the coal power plant despite of the environmental problem and health conditions problem in Indonesia. The most problematic things is this project is not really useful because of in Indonesia we have a lot of 50% of oversupply electricity, but keep forcing building a new coal power plant. And even a study from recent study from Greenpeace state that if Java 9 and 10 project were executed and built, it will only cause 5,000 premature deaths around Banten in Java. And at the upstream level, the coal usage for this project is very high because of almost 10 million tons per year will be consumed for this coal power plant. Based on these important considerations, I urge that IFC to accelerate policy transformations and require the financial flows, and IFC has to withdraw the equity from the Hana Bank group. This is important because in order to make the Hana Bank Indonesia immediately divest from Java 910 project, IFC should close the loopholes, despite they state that they don't want to invest in fossil fuel, but if they still invest through the financial intermediaries, the new coal power plant still can be happen and still can be built in Indonesia. I hope that our demands can be seriously heard and can be realized for our environment, for our Earth, because the climate crisis absolutely cannot be carried out partially, but must be carried out with a comprehensive approach and method. And this is involving a global party, including the IFC and all these fellow friends here. I hope that this project will be cancelled and Java 910 project especially cannot be funded to continue the project constructions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andre, for describing to us the situation there in Indonesia. And just for folks who are joining now, just so that you know, the United States is the largest shareholder in the World Bank and the IFC, which supported these coal power plants, Java 9 and 10, that Andre is describing. So the United States has a significant influence in these policies, and the legislation that the congressman introduced would end these abusive financial flows. So thank you, Andre, for bringing that perspective from Indonesia. So moving in terms of latest time zones, we'll move to Anuradha next. Anuradha Munshi is a research coordinator with the Center for Financial Accountability in India. Thank you so much, Anuradha, for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. We have been Center for Financial Accountability, just to give a brief about it, basically looks at accountability of international financial institutions and works with communities to hold these institutions accountable. Not wasting much time, I'll just move ahead with talking about the Sasan Ultra Mega Coal Power Project, which is one of the world's largest integrated power generation and coal mine projects located in India. It has been supported by the US Export-Import Bank and was originally financed by it in 2010 with more than $900 million US. This project from the very inception has been marred with serious violations of human rights, labor, health and safety. In fact, the cumulative impacts of the project have never even been evaluated. There were serious violations happening on the ground, and the affected communities, along with the civil society organizations, reached to the US Exim Bank's Office of Inspector General for the first time in 2014, bringing out some of these comprehensive issues that marred the project. This was followed by an investigation that was done by the Office of Inspector General, which itself was marred by huge problems. And these concerns were communicated with the office of the OIG time and again. What was really shocking for the community and for us back was the fact that the kind of indifference that was confirmed through the report of the Office of Inspector General. Most of the report was just talking about the cost overruns, and hardly 1/3 of it mentioned about the impact on the lives and livelihoods of the people. And the accidents that had happened at the project site, which which was close to 13 people had lost their life. That was reported. It mentioned it as tragic and absolutely unacceptable. There were only two things that kind of correctly came out in the report, that the deaths occurred and there was a recognition of these deaths, and there was a recommendation for independent accountability, the formation of an independent accountability mechanism. We never heard about the mechanism again. On the death of the laborers, there was nothing done beyond the report and a letter from the chairman to make sure that that does not happen in future. This is even after writing to the OIG again in 2018 about the deaths, which continued to happen and was recorded in the monitoring reports of the company in 2016, 2017. We never got a positive response. This kind of provided an impunity to the company to kind of operate in the manner they did. In 2018, the local population in Sasan had filed a complaint with the local authorities regarding the faulty construction of the project and the violation of the ash disposal requirement. In 2019, a notice was sent to the company, which they completely ignored. In 2019, October, people protested and they were seeing that there were issues with the fly ash dam of the project. They sat in protest for days together for almost 21 days, but nothing came out. The company did not pay any heed. And in April, what was feared came true. In April 2020, that is last year, the ash dam broke, which resulted in death of 6 people, including 3 children. Hundreds of cattle died. Almost 1,000 hectares of agricultural land was totally submerged under ash. Crops and vegetables were destroyed. The polluted ash water went into the Rihand Dam, and it polluted the drinking water also. Despite this, the local administration did very little to take any steps in terms of corrective measures. We also reached out to the Exim Bank on this. But nothing much happened, though we had reached out to the bank, and we did get certain response saying that Exim Bank's independent consultants would undertake their own separate review and investigation into this matter, but nothing much came out of that. The compensation, the namesake compensation that was paid to the people, was as close to $60 for the damage to their fields, to the crops. This is literally adding insult to injury. Despite this, the people have continued to make complaints to the local authorities about the continued dismal situation and non-corrective measures, no corrective measures being taken by the company itself. Despite these assurances from Exim Bank as well, in May 2021, this year, the monitoring report that was submitted to the US Exim Bank did not even mention about the fly ash breach that had caused death and that had caused so much damage to the agricultural community. The fears came true again in June this year, when there was a second breach that happened. The company continues to operate with impunity. A very shoddy investigation was done at a local level, despite having had 2 such major incidents. What we want to say over here is, if the bank had done a thorough and impartial job of investigation back in 2015 and taken stern action on the basis of findings, probably these continued accidents, rather not even these manufactured accidents, the criminal negligence would not have occurred. The way bank is also, in a way, we want to say that even US Exim Bank is responsible for what has happened now. They have enabled these companies to keep going ahead with continued violations. At this point of time,
Anu, sorry to interrupt. Just one more minute.
we just want to make a couple of points very, very clear. We want that there needs to be an independent investigation, an impartial investigation into this project, which has caused a decade of violations of human rights, of criminal negligence. We want that ensure genuine compensation is paid to people who are affected, and there is a restoration of the damage caused to the environment. And also Exim Banks definitely needs to have and act upon an independent accountability mechanism if they decide to continue to fund projects like these, which are high risk. Thank you. I'm also sharing a link to a video where you can actually visually see the kind of damage that has been caused to the community. It's in the chat box. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anu. It's just devastating to hear what happened, and even more revolting the U.S. Exim Bank's role in this, and the lack of accountability. So thank you for sharing that, and we'll have a chance for discussion after these remarks. So if anybody has follow-up questions for Anu, we'll have a chance to discuss those. So thank you again, Anu. And I encourage folks to watch the video that she has shared in the chat. Without further ado, next I'll pass it on to Olanrewaju Suraju, who is the chairman of the Human and Environmental Development Agenda Resource Center in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Olanre, for being with us, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, Louisa? Can everybody hear me? Very good. Okay, thank you so much. Without wasting much time to do additional introduction to what Louisa already done, the case in Nigeria is not totally different from what you've just listened to in India, and also the same thing that you've heard about Indonesia. And this actually cuts across most of the, especially in this particular case, looking at the oil explorating and exploitating companies that are operating in Nigeria. As far back as particularly 1976, there's been effort at cutting gas flaring in Nigeria. And gas flaring in Nigeria has been so devastating that it is not only a threat to the communities where you experience the flaring of gas, it is already a threat to even states outside the oil-producing communities, such that the coastal states of Nigeria are under the threat of going under due to climate change in the nearest future. It is also becoming a global challenge, because the contribution of Nigeria, with Nigeria being one of the 10 countries highest polluter of the gas flaring, is such that the only contribution that Nigeria has to the greenhouse gas emission is coming from the gas flaring exercise. And all efforts at making the oil companies to convert the gas. I mean, this is in a country where there's the lack of even domestic gas for people's normal daily life of operation in terms of the domestic gas for heating and for cooking. People resort to firewood. This is a population where only 30% of the country is serviced with power supply that needs not more than even the available gas to fire. Those gas being flared is capable of not only powering Nigeria, is capable of powering the whole of the West African sub-region in Africa. But this is not only flared and wasted, this is also to the extent of now, like I said, threatening the global warming with the contribution that Nigeria is making from the gas flaring effort. And these are part of the contributions that is predominantly 90% sector, operated by foreign companies that are supported by, I can say directly or indirectly, by the US system and also the financial sector. And for a country like Nigeria, where the community and the people lack the access to basic facilities of water, to health, to education, to good road, you can imagine the implication of the hazardous gas that goes into the air and not only pollute their health system, also the water that they get to drink, because they majorly drink from the stream. Many of them are farmers and also fishermen. The source of livelihood is also heavily impacted. And for us, this is where we want to see a very serious, conscious concern from the U.S. system, both from the Congress and also the state. The whole effort at stopping the gas flaring, as far back as 1976, was shifted again in 2020 from the deadline to now 2030. Unfortunately, on annual basis, the Nigerian system, with the sanctions and also penalties that are attached to the gas flaring, is breached by these oil companies to the extent of the country losing an average of about $1 billion, not to the gas flaring, but the failure of the companies to pay the appropriate penalties that are associated with the gas flaring. And this is largely due to the situation of corruption, and that is why we are quite pleased when we hear and also see the body language and also the clear statement of the US president on the need to actually take very seriously the issue of corruption outside the United States, and then also the new policy strategy that was released by the State Department on the strategy for combating corruption outside the United States. And this for us is where we want to see not just the countries and the people that are operating in the countries, but importantly also the companies that are associated and also operating in many of our countries. We would want to appreciate, we know that the SEC, that is the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States, has the control over many of the companies, not even just the companies that are owned by the United States or citizens of the United States. Other companies are registered with SEC. Shell is owned by the Netherlands and the UK government, but it's also registered with Shell. So it has obligation to meet some of the expected minimum standard and regulations of SEC and also the United States system. The 30% that I said that is serviced by the fossil fuel energy supply is still under the expected or required, and 70% are still without electricity. So there's a need for investment in the new clean and just transition to clean energy that can provide and meet the 70% that are still underserved in terms of power supply and energy supply for the country. So I thank this for this opportunity, just also to keep within time, and then look forward to questions and also interaction. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lanri, for explaining to us what's happening there in Nigeria with gas flaring and the U.S. role and in enabling this, and also making the link to the issue of corruption that is so endemic to so many of these projects. Thank you so much. And again, folks, we'll have a chance for you to ask questions for our presenters. So hang on to them and we'll get there shortly. Thank you again, Lanri. And last but not least, we'll hear next from Melinda Janke. She's an international environmental lawyer, as she mentioned earlier to the congressman, who's taking Exxon to court for its abuses in Guyana. So Melinda, over to you, and thank you again for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Louisa, for having me join this meeting, and it's really an honor to be able to engage with everyone. I'm going to talk about Guyana, South America, which is a carbon sink. And in 2015, Guyana's policy decision and obligation under the Paris Agreement was to convert to 100% renewable energy by 2025. Unfortunately, under the previous administration, the World Bank appeared to have a pro-fossil fuel approach and has lent Guyana millions of dollars to become a fossil fuel producer and not to do renewable energy. The World Bank project financed is hiring ExxonMobil's lawyers to dismantle the Guyana's legislation. Now, Guyana has very strong environmental laws, and we were able to stop the dismantling of the Environmental Protection Act for now. I actually drafted that act many years ago, and it covers climate change and it covers greenhouse gas emissions. The World Bank has also put pressure on Guyana to allow ExxonMobil to continue flaring until 2030. Flaring, in my opinion, is already illegal under Guyana's laws, and in fact, Exxon had undertaken to re-inject the natural gas. So far, they've changed the permits, but we still think it's illegal. Now the World Bank is lending Guyana money to take that associated gas, which Exxon is flaring, billions of standard cubic feet of gas, and use it for a gas to shore project, which will cost roughly $1 billion US. Instead of investing that money in renewable energy, the World Bank is urging Guyana to invest it in a gas project. This is despite the fact that the World Bank's own study says that there is little or no domestic gas market in Guyana. So the bank knows that this can't work, and there is a significant risk of that gas already being a stranded asset and of Guyana being left with a gas project that is expensive and dangerous and unnecessary. Obviously, if this is a stranded asset and Guyana is loaded with this debt, it will not help regional stability. In addition, we know that Exxon has admitted to using faulty equipment. They're using faulty equipment, which is why they're flaring billions of cubic feet of gas. And faulty equipment is a real danger sign, and we are really concerned about these operations offshore Guyana. If there is a well blowout or a spill, that will not only destroy the environment, but it would also destroy the livelihoods and probably the economies of our Caribbean sisters and brothers. And this again is not going to be helpful for regional stability. Now, the World Bank has claimed that they came into Guyana in order to help Guyana improve governance to get ready for oil and gas. I want to say that there's massive in-country opposition to this oil because of the dangers, because of the greenhouse gas pollution. This World Bank project to improve governance is itself illegal. So they signed this agreement with someone who was not the Minister of Finance, because at the time the government had fallen and there was no one in the position of Minister of Finance. The World Bank's support for fossil fuels in Guyana is contrary to the Paris Agreement and therefore unlawful. And it's also contrary to IDA's own articles of incorporation under international law, which talk about the economy and efficiency being key considerations. And we've written to the World Bank demanding answers, and they have not been able to explain their actions under any one of their initiatives. Those letters have gone to David Malpass. They're in the public domain, and I'm very happy to share them with anyone who would like to see them and to use them to stop the World Bank funding greenhouse gas pollution. In summary, the ask would be to halt the existing funding from the World Bank, which is pushing Guyana into becoming a fossil fuel producer rather than remaining a carbon sink, and to force the World Bank to provide answers to the questions that we have asked, because we are entitled to know what they're doing and what their supposed reasons are. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Melinda, for sharing about your incredible efforts in Guyana. And I think, you know, for folks who didn't pick up on some of the important points that Melinda raised, again, the US is the largest shareholder in the World Bank, and so has significant influence in its policies. But also to point out that some of the support that the World Bank is giving to these countries in terms of enabling fossil fuels is not just through direct project finance. As Melinda described in the World Bank's role in dismantling Guyana's environmental protection laws, these institutions also have a role in influencing regulatory regimes in country, tax codes in a way that has been enabling fossil fuel development. And the legislation that Congressman Huffman and Senator Merkley have introduced would address these indirect forms of support as well. So thank you, Melinda, for sharing your situation. And, you know, for folks who want to follow up with Melinda, we'll go next to a Q&A session, and I'll pass it over to my colleague, Kate DeAngelis, to moderate that. Again, we'll be turning off recording for this session so that we can have a more candid